order, a war for gold, a war for money, and a war for souls. A war on terror, a war on drugs, a war on kindness, a war on hugs, a war on birds, and a war on bees. They got a war on hippies.
Hi, I'm Liz Reese, and welcome to Voices of Resistance. Today's show is entitled Hawaii J20, Inaugurating Resistance. And me and my guests are going to be talking about local plans here in Hawaii happening on January 20th to stand up and oppose the Trump-Pence regime. First, I want to welcome my guests and introduce them. With me today, I have Nandita Sharma, who's an activist scholar and is Associate Professor of the Sociology Department at the University of Hawaii, Manoa campus. She is the author of Home Economics, Nationalism, and the Making of Migrant Workers in Canada. Welcome, Nandita.
Thank you.
I also have Gaye Chan, who's an activist artist and chairwoman of the University of Hawaii Art Department, Manoa campus. Welcome, Gaye.
Great to be here.
And both Nandita and Gaye have been very active in a project called Eating in Public, which is an anti-capitalist project that basically sets up free stores, plants food, does seed sharing, and different ways of recycling, and really talking about different social structures and opposing capitalism. So I'm really stoked to have two kick-ass women joining me today. Before I get into discussion with them and talk about January 20th and why something should happen, I want to briefly read a statement from Refuse Fascism. And I really want to encourage everyone to check out the site, refusefascism.org. I'm just going to read a very short portion of the call, but please check it out, read it in its entirety. I encourage people to sign on and to forward it and send it to everyone you know. No. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Donald Trump, the president-elect, is assembling a regime of grave danger. Millions of people in the U.S. and around the world are filled with deep anxiety, fear, and disgust. Our anguish is right and just. Our anger must now become massive resistance before Donald Trump is inaugurated and has the full reins of power in his hands. Should we fail to rise with determination and daring in our millions now to stop this, the consequences for humanity will be disastrous. We, the undersigned, know in the depths of our beings the catastrophe that will befall the people of the world should the Trump-Pence regime assume full power. We therefore call for a month of resistance beginning on December 19th, reaching a crescendo by the January 20th, 2017 inauguration. Our resistance must spread rapidly to every sphere and every corner of the country. Because we refuse to accept a fascist America, millions must rise up in a resistance with a deep determination such that we create a political crisis that prevents the Trump-Pence fascist regime from consolidating its hold on the governance of society. So that's just a small portion from refusefascism.org. So I want to open up with both Nandita and Gaye the discussion around fascism. You know, one of the main slogans that I've been taking out is we refuse to accept a fascist America. Yet when I've been out, protesting and holding signs, which we've been doing every week since the election, I encounter a lot of people that either don't really believe that, Trump is a fascist, that his agenda is fascism, or that, we're just exaggerating, or people don't really understand what that means. So I wanted to start off with, what does that mean? And is he a fascist? And is this a real fascist agenda?
I would say that whatever we call him, Donald Trump is very dangerous. But I do think that there are real legitimate reasons to call him a fascist. I think that many of the people who are objecting to labeling Trump a fascist is because he doesn't look exactly like a Mussolini or a Hitler. But the point is, of course, we're not going to get an exact replica of Mussolini and Hitler. We're going to have different forms of fascism, and the kinds of policies that Trump is bringing in many serious and significant ways, actually mirror the process by which people like Mussolini and Hitler came to have the dictatorial power that they had. So I think it is not hyperbolic, it is not an exaggeration, it is accurate to call Donald Trump a fascist.
It's interesting you mentioned, he's not necessarily Hitler or Mussolini, because recently I've done a couple of episodes of Voices of Resistance kind of doing a comparison to Hitler. And while some aspects were very different, side by side at their different speeches, very frighteningly, a lot of the messages were the same. And how many people said, oh, don't take Hitler seriously. He's just, he's just out there. We're just going to wait it out. And, we'll just, once Hitler's done, then we'll come into power and things will be better. And
well, and it's interesting. I mean, another parallel with Hitler, of course, is that the left in Germany and in Weimar Germany actually won the popular vote. But through the kind of electoral machinations of the German system at that time, Hitler was elected nonetheless. So there's many also kind of structural institutional factors that shocked people in Germany in the 1930s and are shocking people in the United States today.
Very much so.
But I think that, particularly if we look at a particular nexus of actions and demands that Trump has made, there's a particular kind of nexus where we kind of distinguish your run-of-the-mill liberal democratic, politician, state leader, and your, fascist, proto-fascist, or-fascist, whatever we want to call these people. And that's this kind of nexus of authoritarianism, nationalism, populism, revivalism, let's make America great again, xenophobia. And when all of that comes together in one administration, that's when things become very dangerous.
And we've definitely seen that happen, and how Trump has just unleashed all of that.
That's right.
And just, into this huge lynch mob that's ready to just go off.
Yeah. And another thing that is very, very similar historically, as you were mentioning, there are some, grave similarities. And one of them is, fascists tend to, when they are campaigning, to run on putting the unemployed back to work, for example. And what we have seen that, of course, that resonates with people because that's a very real concern. In a capitalist society, you have to have a job that pays you money in order to survive. So if you don't have that, things become very, very dire. So when someone comes along and promises to get you back to work and to get you a good job, that is very, very serious. And what we have found in the past, like what Hitler did, what Mussolini did, is as soon as they took over the reins of power, they did exactly the opposite. And we have indications that this is exactly what Trump will do once he's in power by who he's nominating for his, cabinet, the heads of various departments. For example, Andrew Puzder, who is Trump's choice for Secretary of Labor. Normally it's been a norm not to appoint either a CEO or a union leader to the post of Secretary of Labor for the obvious reasons that they would have one position or the other to promote. But Andrew Puzder is a CEO of a major corporation. He opposes the minimum wage.
Yep.
Right? He leads the corporate fight. He's the leader of the corporate fight against the Fight for $15 campaign. And he talks very fondly of the day that robots are going to replace all his fast food workers. So Trump ran on a ticket of, I'm going to give you jobs and I'm going to give you good jobs. And he's appointing a Secretary of Labor who doesn't even believe that there should be a minimum wage. So, like Hitler, who as soon as he got into power, banned strikes, dissolved independent trade unions, lowered wage earners' purchasing power, and showered money on the armaments industries, the war industries, we can see that Trump is copying that out of the playbook of fascism.
I agree. And, you know, in the beginning when he starts his cabinet appointees, you know, you're frightened and you keep seeing who he's appointing, from Steve Bannon to, you know, Rex Tillerson, who's the Secretary of State, former executive of the Exxon. Go on and on. James Mattis, Secretary of Defense, Jeff Sessions, you know, hardcore racist for Attorney General, and Rick Perry as Secretary of Energy, who before said he wanted to do away with the Department of Energy. And you think it can't get worse.
Like, shaking of my head.
It's insane. And you look at who he's really consolidating and who he's putting in these positions.
Yeah, because the other thing that we can, you know, really see what fascists have done in the past, and that we see Trump following the playbook on, is, you know, rallying up the, you know, the electorate to, like, we don't trust government, it's out of control, they're unaccountable, and that's true. Right, the government has been unaccountable, and there have been a lot of things that have happened under the previous administrations that are very, very troubling. Donald Trump, of course, came in promising to make government accountable to people again, and what we've seen again with his cabinet appointments is exactly the opposite, right? Putting the head of ExxonMobil as a Secretary of State, who is right now in a conflict of interest because ExxonMobil has a $500 million, you know, oil agreement with Putin's Russia that is currently on hold because of U.S.-led sanctions against Russia.
Yep.
You know, on and on. Like, what he's doing is actually making government far less accountable. So again, this is right out of the playbook of, you know, a fascist regime, that you run on this very populist, I'm one of the people, I'm going to be your voice in the state, et cetera. And once in power, it is actually, you know, they become the hammer that really destroys working class people's lives. So that's, you know, very, very troubling.
And I really want to encourage people, we're going to get more into Hawaii J20, but I want to encourage people to also go to that website, hawaii-j20.com. And there is links on there that has some information about all the different appointees that is very good. So people should check that out as well. Once again, hawaii-j20.com. To kind of continue our discussion, another aspect I found very troubling, to add to the very, very long list of very troubling aspects here, is in going out and talking to people. Where, you know, if someone who's been an activist for a very long time, I'm used to, you know, having discussions and often heated debates with people. And nowadays, I find it so difficult to have a basic discussion because there's no base level of truth. You know, talking to people, you're like, you know, there's no basis to start on what is real, what is true. And more than I've ever noticed before, this is more and more true as I talk to people. So just kind of both your folks' thoughts on, you know, how Trump as this anti-truth and anti-critical thinking president, you know, what that means for people and how difficult it is to even have a real discussion because, you know, people won't even say that, you know, climate change is real. Or, you know, I've had discussions where people, 3 different women on different occasions have said to me regarding choice and abortion rights, well, do you know that women go in and you can have an abortion the day before you deliver a baby? And I mean, just putting all truth and science out the window. So what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's been a while since public education has been gutted. And I think that when people don't have access to basic skills of how to find information and to critically engage with how to deal with information, I think this is just a continued escalation of not having any way to leverage your intellect. So I think that so there's that part of public education, and also I think that media has continued for the last several decades to just accelerate these false realities, and it's very seductive and it's very skillfully done. So I think it's not particularly a surprise that we end up at this juncture.
And I think, you know, 2 things. One, this is right out of the playbook of fascism as well. I think each new generation thinks that, the time that they're living in is unique. But if we look at how Hitler ran for power, he also was a post-fact leader. He would tell lie after lie from the podium, and by the time people were, able to fact check, with obviously much less resources than we have today, it was too late. So the big lies always overshadowed the small truths, the big lies, and especially through the process of scapegoating that Trump is doing, blaming people for very, very long-term, very, very complicated problems. All of a sudden it's very easy, it's Mexicans, it's Muslims, it's, willful women who want to have sex, et cetera, right? So I think that's one thing that's really important to understand, is that running on lies is part of how people like this get into power, because they can't run on truth, because the truth would prevent them from gaining power. But secondly, I think that there's a real cynicism in government, a real cynicism about truth that has been fostered by one administration after the other. So the Obama administration may not be denying climate change, which is good, right? And that's going to seem like really revolutionary after Trump gets in. But nonetheless, even if the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, and the previous administrations didn't deny climate change, they also didn't do anything about it. They actually exacerbated the problem. So the cynicism, I think, is the entry point for getting someone like Trump in, right? Because if you get someone who's saying, truth doesn't matter, power matters, and I want the power, and if you give it to me, then you will have the power too, then that's very seductive. And I think that, those of us who are trying to oppose Trump need to understand this kind of very, very complicated process. And how do we deal with cynicism? How do we address...
It's a hard one.
How do we address the real lack of trust in government? And it's a good lack of trust in government, but it's been redirected to get someone who will lie to us on a daily basis in power.
And who I believe will, take all the crimes that have been committed by the U.S. government from going way back when, and take all those and continue them. Basically be all those crimes like on steroids.
Well, and celebrated.
Yes.
Openly,
yes.
At least one of the things that we have gained, the women's movement, the anti-racist movement, the civil rights movements, the workers' movements, et cetera, all the things that we gained are on the chopping block. And part of that is what can be said in public. What can be part of accepted public discourse? And that is one of the frightening things. We've seen, of course, since just 1 month after election, there's been over 1,000 hate incidents tracked by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks hate crimes in the United States. Over 1,000, a massive increase from the previous year. So what we're seeing is people being emboldened to come out and be violent. Right, so this is another, part of the playbook of fascism, is the empowering of people to take power into their own hands. So this cynicism against the government leads to vigilantism, right, and militias, and that's exactly what Donald Trump has been fostering in his campaign, and will continue to do so afterwards.
Definitely, to the point where you see the KKK wanting to come out and openly celebrate and have victory parades.
Right.
Well, and Trump having victory tours,
Right.
which is right out of the playbook as well. Yeah. So, yeah.
So another topic I wanted to raise is I've also heard from many people, it's too late, okay? Get over it. He's president-elect. It's, too late, or else just, he won't be that bad. All those horrible, awful, racist, women-hating, immigrant bashing, all those awful things he said, he didn't really mean it. It's not going to be that bad. Let's just wait it out and see. So what is your response to people who either say, get over it, he won the election, or
Yeah,
just
I've been
wait.
hearing a lot of that as well. But I think it's interesting because I'm not denying that he's won the election. I'm not happy about it, but I'm not denying it. But I haven't been really happy about who's been president before. And it doesn't mean that you don't engage with the policies that he or she has put in place. And I think that, I guess it's only he, what am I saying? So I think that Trump is no different, and I've certainly objected to some of Obama's policies and was vocal about it, and there's no difference in this case. I think I'll become more busy than usual. So I think that some people who are saying that to get over it, I think that they collapse the interest to resist as our inability to accept that he's president, and I think we have to kind of separate those two issues completely. It's part of democracy to object.
And I also think that Trump did lie about some of the things that he's going to do. Unfortunately, they were the wrong things that he lied about, right? Like getting people back to work, ending, pro-big business, free trade deals, et cetera. Like that, he did lie on that. He's been caught on tape talking to the heads of the big tech companies in the United States saying, we are going to put in free trade agreements, we want your input on this, we haven't gone far enough in the past. So he has lied. What he hasn't lied about are the things that people think he's going to backtrack on: attacking immigrants, a Muslim registry. He demanded a national stop and frisk program. He's not backing down on those at all. And we know that, not because we can read his mind, but we can read the list of nominees and appointments that he is making.
Exactly.
If he was going to, he's backing down on creating jobs. He's backing down on free trade agreements by the people he's putting in place. He put into place a Secretary of the Treasury, like he's appointed the Secretary of the Treasury, who was the head of, was a major player in Goldman Sachs, a classic corporate fixer. Goldman Sachs foreclosed on 37,000 homeowners during the housing crash. This is the person that he's put in charge of Treasury. So he has lied. But when you look at who he's put in charge of things that would protect people, like, protect immigrants, protect workers, protect the civil liberties of Muslims, he is living up to his promises. He's put into power Mike Flynn as his national security advisor, who is an avowed Islamophobe. So he's not backing down on attacking Muslims. He's put in Jeff Sessions, as you mentioned, as his nominee for Attorney General. The Attorney General oversees civil rights. Jeff Sessions is on record as a civil rights critic, as an opposer of civil rights. So he's not going to back down on that. And that's not just our paranoia. These are the people that he's putting in power to oversee key departments.
If I remember correctly, I think Jeff Sessions called a civil rights lawyer a race traitor.
A white civil rights lawyer who was defending black defendants in a civil rights case. He called him a race traitor. This is the guy who is being put in charge. Hopefully he won't get confirmed, but there's no guarantee of that. It's up to us to make sure he does it. But this is the guy who's been put in charge of civil rights. So he's not backing down. He's actually going forward full steam.
And I just want to respond to something Gaye mentioned. While I definitely agree with you that, under the Democrats and Obama, many crimes were continued. The whole drone campaign is a good example to me of how the Obama administration really whitewashed and used drones, and it became normalized, and as opposed to boots on the ground, so to speak.
Deportations.
More deportations than Bush, for all that time. So while I feel, I was constantly speaking out about crimes being committed under the Obama administration. But because, especially of all the things Nandita was laying out, you know, the road to fascism and this truly fascist agenda, I really see this as different as to why it is so very crucial. And even right after the election, it didn't really click in for me. I mean, I was, of course, horrified, outraged, took to the streets right away in protesting. But over some time, it's really kind of taken me to step back and go, this is really real. This is really real. This is more crucial than ever. Like, everyone has to, like, rise up, and it's going to take so much courage and so much people in order to really, really stop them before they obtain power. If that were to happen, I believe it's going to take millions and millions of people in the streets. But I think it is possible.
Supporter, I would be more angry than I am now. Because I think, you know, I've been reading a lot about why people have supported Trump, and some of their reasons are totally legitimate. Like, they have no employment, they have lost everything, and they want something to happen. And they believed that he would make those changes. And like what Nandita was saying, like, these things are no longer on the table. And so, you know, what you read in the beginning about how people are frightened, anxious, and disgusted, like, so I think this program is not for people who opposed Trump from the beginning. It's for everyone, because what he's putting into place is going to destroy all of us. Like, everything that's meaningful in life.
Humanity and the planet.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't imagine an American president that I would say, oh, wow, this is a fantastic person doing wonderful things, really helping the planet, taking care of elderly people, you know, giving us all of the kind of security and peace and comfort that every human being deserves. Like, there's been no such president.
Because there wouldn't be a president that would ever do that.
It's an oxymoron.
Yes.
Right? However, you know, having said that, there is a world of difference between a liberal democracy and a fascist regime. And if we don't take that seriously, we are going to be its first victims. You know, professors are often the first group of people that fascist regimes go after, because we know our history, we know how to analyze, you know, what is going on, and we have a platform. Our classrooms, our university campuses, you know, people take us seriously. So, you know, professors are often the first people to go. So this is like personal for me. The difference between a liberal democracy and business as usual, and, you know, we're going to get into power, and then we're, you know, going to promise you a bunch of things that probably aren't going to happen. And a fascist regime, there's a world of difference. You know, a fascist regime gets in often historically through electoral means, but quickly starts diminishing and destroying the checks and balances, the norms of how you operate a government, the kinds of individual rights and liberties that people have to oppose what the government might want to do. You know, the basic institutions of liberal democracies. And that is all that is standing between us and someone like Trump with all of his big business cronies who are lining up with their tongues hanging out right now, waiting to cash in on this regime, right? That's all those democratic institutions are the only thing standing between us. And what I see that is unique about Trump as compared to Obama, compared to even someone as odious as George W. Bush, right, is that those two, as you know, much damage and harm that they did to the planet and many people on it, maintained this kind of, you know, maintained these institutions of liberal democracy. And Trump not only ran on, but he's putting people in place that are going to destroy the very institutions they're being put in charge of, right? So whether that's a Secretary of Labor who doesn't believe in minimum wage, or it's the Education Secretary who wants to privatize public education, this is different. This is not business as usual.
Trump is not. Sign now?
Like Trump is
Yes.
Trump is not just another, disappointing president. He's dangerous in a way that the previous ones have not been.
Yes, I completely agree. And that's why I really want to encourage people to be part of January 20th, which we're going to get into. So once again, the website is Hawaii-J20.com. And that's the Day of Resistance happening here in Hawaii. Now, I read the call from refusefascism.org, and there's actually a whole month of events being planned leading up to January 20th. So first I want to ask you, why did you both feel it was important to be part of this Day of Resistance here in Hawaii and be part of Hawaii J20?
Well, I think that the three words that you use, anxious, frightened, and disgusted, those pretty much captures my feelings about it. And I think that the amount of damage that is going to be put in place is, I have a really good imagination. This is way beyond what I could have made up myself. And I think that if I didn't do everything I could to stop at least some of the things from happening, I would not be able to live with myself. Because I have many, many friends with little ones, and this is the world that they're going to inherit, and everything that's meaningful will be destroyed for them, and I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. So that's my motivation.
It's very powerful. Nandita?
I also, my first reaction when Donald Trump got elected was shame, actually. I was, of course, also very frightened, but I also felt ashamed. I was like, why did I think he wouldn't get elected? Why didn't I do more not to get him elected?
I had a lot of the same feelings.
I just felt like I have really let down everything and everyone that I care about. And I need to change this. I need to make sure that I use whatever skills and energy that I have to make sure that we understand the danger, that we do everything in our power to mitigate that danger, and most importantly, that we not dismiss or treat people as people to be avoided. We really need to get out there and organize. And I feel like, as someone who's been an organizer for a large part of my life, that I failed. I didn't organize against Trump, and now it's just I need to start doing it right now, and I need to keep doing it until this danger is past.
I think, like a lot of activists, myself included, I saw the horrors of kind of the base and the ideology that Trump was unleashing, and really saw that danger, but didn't really recognize, the Trump agenda itself, and was more thinking, okay, well, after Hillary gets into power, how are we going to get people to see that, the war's going to continue, and she's going to do all these horrible things, and so a lot of the same feelings that you have.
And the shame was, not just like in the months leading up to Trump's election, but where was the left when people were unemployed and desperate, all across the United States, all across the world? Where were we? We weren't there for them, right?
Or when the war continues, or when black people are being murdered by police.
Yeah, we weren't there for people. We, have occasionally come out for protests, and then even not all the time. But we haven't come out for this hard day-to-day slog of organizing people, talking to the people that we work with, going to people's work sites and talking to them, going to the unemployment line and talking to people, going to homeless shelters and talking to people that are forced to sleep on the streets, so that the only person that they see as someone that is looking out for them is not some lying wannabe fascist dictator. The left has got to pull itself together, reorganize, build a large movement that can take this on, and that means like that day-to-day organizing. So yes, we're organizing a protest for Inauguration Day, but more so we really need to build that culture of resistance. And we need to offer people who are upset and angry an avenue where their real concerns are actually going to be met, not just, allow them to be captured by some, mesmerizing person who's going to manipulate their fears. So as someone who very much considers herself part of the left and has for almost my entire life, we need to do that. We need to rebuild the left in a way that hasn't existed for much of my adulthood.
That kind of leads me into a topic I wanted to talk to Gaye about, and talking about a culture of resistance. I feel very strongly that a culture of resistance includes musicians, artists,
Right.
on so many different fronts, so many different levels. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about, how you see the role of artists, and how, people tend to have a view of resistance as simply protesting and marching, but how resistance
Right.
can take so many forms.
Right. Well, I think that artists, I work in a building where people are always making things, doing experiments, testing to see if things work. We have the really good fortune of being able to be provided the tools of expression, in all variety of forms. And so it's no, I think it's not a surprise that artists often are the ones that come out, because we know how to make signs and print T-shirts and so on. And I think that the art department really is about critical thinking. It's about problem solving and hard kind of material manipulation tools. But we're not different from many other people. All we have is an easy access to these tools of articulating what we can imagine, both in resistance and just like imagining a different world. And so I would love it if our students would be actually inspired by the challenges that come ahead, because artists are often looking for inspirations to speak about, and
There's a lot to speak about.
right. And if anything, this is a very inspiring occasion.
Now, I want to encourage all viewers and people to carry with them sidewalk chalk. It's a very easy, simple thing. I am like the least artistic person around, but carrying sidewalk chalk around, and whether you write, no Trump, no fascism, whatever message people want to write, I really want to encourage people to do that. It can have a little bit of an impact on people, and it is completely legal. So even when, someone comes over to you and says, "What are you doing with that sidewalk chalk?" It is completely legal. So that's a very simple thing.
Or just things like your feelings, like I'm scared, I'm completely confused, I can't tell what's real. Those things are very powerful. And I think it speaks articulately about what we are experiencing right now.
And I know what you're saying when you said artists are no different, but I have to tell you, as a non-artist, political artwork and messages are so inspiring, and can really bring,
Like your T-shirt.
so yes,
Yeah.
Keith Haring,
Yeah.
and can just really inspire and motivate. And so I give big props to artists who are
I think that's
creating
maybe
art of
because
resistance.
artists allow people to think for themselves, which not
Truly
not everyone
more of.
does.
Yes.
Well, but I do want to say that art as or artists are also not different, because we as human beings also need approval and affirmation. And Hitler, like one of the most important filmmakers of all time, Leni Riefenstahl, did dynamic, inspiring work, and she
Yep.
worked for she worked for fascism.
That's right.
And her work continues to this day to really influence fashion photography because of how
that
seductive
true?
and
Wow.
alluring they are. So, so I think that having the tools doesn't mean that you apply it for something that's
Right.
good. And that's always a danger.
So I want to jump right into Hawaii J20. If you can talk a little bit about the group. I've told people to check out the website. Has a really good list of the mission and goals. But if you can just talk a little bit for people about what it is, what's happening.
It originated spontaneously at UH Manoa. The first week after the Trump election, a group of faculty and students put together a, ad hoc teach-in, like let's just stand in this courtyard and talk to people about what's going on. And a large number of people came out. And then people were like, we should do this, we should meet again, figure out what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And then the next week, a number of people came out. And we were like, well, we need to do something on Inauguration Day. We can't just let it be another day. This is not just another president. We need to do something. So we just kept meeting. We had another teach-in, which was even bigger than the last teach-in, where we talked about all of the big issues, climate change, women's reproductive rights, civil liberties.
And it wasn't just professors talking.
No.
A lot of organizations came.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, undergraduate students, graduate students, faculty, lecturers. It was the whole group of people at UH, and we've been organizing ever since. And at every meeting, people are like, "Wow, I can't believe this many people came out again." It's now been weeks. People are still very, very energized. So. It just came together in that same way, like, oh my God, what has happened and what are we going to do about it? So there is a list of activities that we have planned for Inauguration Day. I don't know if you want to read out the mission statement or our goals.
Yeah, I'll try and, I think I'll just read part of it, but it's really good. So once again, go to the website, check it out. It's very easy to navigate as someone who has a very difficult time navigating websites. It's very clear and simple. It's got some great artwork as well. It's our missions and goals. On Friday, January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump will likely, maybe not, be inaugurated as President of the United States. It must be made clear to the whole world that the vast majority of people in the United States do not support his presidency or consent to his agenda. Trump and his appointees stand in opposition to the values we embrace as residents of Hawaii. We will never support fascism, and we will not sit idly by as the institutions of democracy are destroyed. And I'm not going to read the whole mission statement, but I really want people to check it out. It's really good. I'm going to read the last paragraph of it. We must take to the streets and protest, blockade, disrupt, intervene, sit in, walk out, rise up, and make more noise and good trouble than the establishment can bear. We must delegitimize the Trump agenda. It's time to defend ourselves, our loved ones, and the world that sustains us, as if our lives depend on it, because they do. I thought it was a really awesome, it just gave me chicken skin reading it. And I think really getting people to understand the seriousness, and people's lives really do depend on this. So I want to make a call out to anyone watching this show. I encourage people to do whatever you can on January 20th. I know for some people it's very difficult to take out off of work, childcare, that kind of thing. I really want to encourage people to go all out, do whatever you can. When you miss work or such and such for your cousin's wedding or this and that, this is the time. This is the time to
It's National Sick Day.
Yeah.
Totally.
And bring your kids.
And bring your kids, exactly.
Because what we are planning is nonviolent. It is people power at its most, engaging. And we are calling on people not to go to work. We're calling on people not to attend classes that day. We're calling on people not to go shopping. We want to demonstrate to those people who think that big business and money and the war industry is going to, just roll right over us, that actually we do have the collective power to shut things down when we want to. And this is a very, very appropriate day to have a National Sick Day.
Totally. and thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands should come out in Hawaii and can come out in Hawaii and send a huge, powerful voice along with people all across the country, along with people around the world.
Yeah, because everyone in the world is going to be watching our response on that day and that day forward. Are people in the United States just going to take this, and allow that big money war machine to roll right over us? Or are we, are we going to allow our public education system to be privatized, to get rid of Medicare? These are the things that Trump is proposing. Get, no minimum wage? What are we talking about here?
This is how his plans to get the jobs back.
Right. Get the jobs back by giving us 29 cents an hour,
or
right?
less.
So it's this is serious. This is not business as usual. This is not a normal presidency.
I want to add that the name that we came up with, Hawaii J20, is an attempt to connect with movements across the country using the date of January 20. But the subtitle is Inaugurating Resistance, right? So the day is the big bang of event, but it's really, we need to be able to keep going because there will be a lot of battles to fight, more than we can even imagine at this point.
Yeah, so the coalition, and the solidarity that we build that day is actually the most important thing that we're doing. So yes, take to the streets, call in sick, come out, don't go shopping, come out and join us. We do have public events planned in Waikiki. There's a convergence at Gateway Park, which is where Kuhio and Kalakaua split off in Waikiki, and then we will be marching from there to Trump Tower. And from Trump Tower, there will be a free concert at the Waikiki Shell that evening. So there's an entire day of activities planned, but the biggest thing that we are doing is building the networks that we're going to need to fight off attacks against each and every one of us in very different aspects of our life, whether that's our children's school, whether that's our grandparents' Medicare, whatever it is, we need to be together on this one.
We do. I'm still want to be very hopeful that if millions and millions and millions of people actually took to the streets, that I do believe there is a possibility that Trump and Pence would not be able to consolidate power and
we know
take
that,
the official, but
we know that he is likely to face a constitutional challenge from day one because he's refusing to divest himself of his obvious business conflicts. His children, who he says are taking care of his business, are also sitting in on all of the political meetings that he's having. So this, which is again right out of the playbook of fascism, right, where you collapse the private and the public. He's
really following that playbook.
Yeah, you collapse that private-public separation. You collapse, big money and big government just collapses. Like he's staying in New York, so the center of world finance is now the center of government power in the United States. He's just collapsing it all, and I'm sure, with organizations like the ACLU, which have promised to be on guard from second one, to all of those other groups, we're going to need all of us.
So since you were talking about some of the activities for that day, and once again, all of these are available on the website, hawaii-j20.com. The current things being planned for the Day of Resistance on January 20th here in Hawaii, 12 to 2:30 p.m. There's going to be a teach-in at the Manoa campus. And there'll be a lot of other art activities and different ways of sign holding and banner dropping happening in the morning. But then a teach-in. And then the goal is to have a bunch of smaller, hopefully not smaller, big feeder marches starting around 2:30 or 3. One from UH campus, Ala Moana Park area, Honolulu Zoo, and then
and perhaps others. We don't know.
And perhaps others. That's right.
We're
hopefully, and lots of others. And if people want to organize a feeder march from anywhere, any high school, any workplace, that would be awesome. And then all of those marches converging at where you were talking about, Waikiki Gateway Park, where Kuhio and Kalakaua meet at that Triangle Park. And then going from there to march to Trump Tower, having a loud voice over there, and then marching down to the Waikiki Shell for a free concert.
Right.
Which I thought was really cool, to add in the concert. And I also want to encourage people to check out The World Can't Wait locally, The World Can't Wait Hawaii.blogspot.com. We're going to be doing a bunch of events leading up to January 20th, including the Martin Luther King parade that we do annually. It will be on January 16th this year. And I think it's really important for people to have a very big presence in that parade. And with the same message, we refuse to accept a fascist America. No Trump, no Pence, no to it all. Having a loud presence there and really building for January 20th. And we don't have any concrete plans, but we're thinking and talking about possibly going out on New Year's Eve somewhere. There's a call for people to go out New Year's Eve to different Trump places, whether it's the Trump Hotel in Waikiki or somewhere else. So we're going to be trying to do some other plans. And we've also been doing sign holdings every Friday since the election. World Can't Wait has been doing different sign holdings every Friday from 4 to 6. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted Gaye to just briefly talk about an incident that happened. I believe it was the first sign holding right after the election. And World Can't Wait was calling for a sign holding over by Ala Moana Beach Park at Atkinson and Ala Moana Boulevard. And you had put something on your Facebook about, coming to make signs and be creative and paint and do whatever.
And get ready for that.
And get ready for the protest. And then you're basically attacked for how dare you call for something political and having a voice at a, campus. So if you could talk about that.
Yeah. So it was my personal Facebook account and just inviting any of my friends, Facebook friends, to come and join me in painting signs on cardboard. The person who objected was a donor of my department, who's actually done, but was very committed to helping us. But he somehow saw that my sign painting was, his words, politicizing my department. And I think that art has always been political. There's no art that's apolitical, even if it's totally market-driven, it's a political position. So regardless, he had pulled the funding from my department. But ironically, I think it's been an event that got, I think it touched the chord. I think it spoke to how, what the new world would be like, that certain types of politics would be ushered in and people would feel an incredible sense of power to control what others could do or think. So it's been, interestingly, a galvanizing event for many people, not just in terms of the fiscal support that's come in to try and take up the space that this donor left, but also that the amount of solidarity from a lot of colleagues, wanting to get involved to see what they could do. So I think that it's kind of worked in the opposite direction of what the donor intended. There was an article that was written that just came out a couple of days ago in Hawaii Independent, and I think that it was a well-researched article. It focused on the person, which I think is really is not that, the person is not that interesting, but I think it's what it's symptomatic of. And the last sentence was, because the donor had said that, can you imagine what would happen if I was planning a pro-Trump sign painting event? And of course that should be fine too, but the question is whether he would have pulled his funding. So his objection is that I was politicizing art in the department, but I think that's not really quite true. I think he was just opposing to a particular kind of politicization.
Well, he was an avowed Trump supporter.
And did he try and say it was unethical for you to use?
Well, he actually went further than that, which is actually scary, because it was almost like it was quote unquote unpatriotic. That this is your president, that why are you opposing? You should get over it. He won. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. We should all unify now. What you're doing is divisive. So it went further than simply
That
you're
is scary.
supporting the wrong person, right? It's like you are now all of a sudden like un-American.
Right.
Because you're not, which is like very, very. That's
And I
frightening.
responded by saying, that I have opposed Obama's policies before, and I think that that's part and parcel what being an American is. Mm-hmm. So.
And you stayed strong, and the university did back
and the
you up.
university was great. It came out very clearly supporting free expression on campus.
And people who have never donated before are starting to donate.
Right.
That's very cool.
That's very cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So and I think that, and I think that what we just have to remember is that in these dangerous, frightening times, we really need to learn how to take care of each other better.
Mm-hmm. And many people are being attacked. As you were talking earlier about professors, many people speaking out on campuses are being attacked, and especially among the science community. Many scientists are being really, really attacked and dragged through the mud, so to speak, for, addressing the planet and climate change.
Right.
How un-American.
I do want to put in
Divisive.
Yeah, I want to put in another word before we end. The website is a work in progress because we've really had very little time to put it together. So we are populating it with more information that hopefully will be very useful for folks. And more events will be happening. So on the website, I encourage everyone to sign up for our mailing list or sign up to participate in the organizing of them.
Yes,
We always need
definitely.
more organizers.
So I want to encourage once again everyone to try and be a part of J20. It is so important, and I know I say it many times, but the future really is unwritten, and it really is up to us. And I just feel that so strongly right now at this time. And I keep struggling with people I know and even friends of mine that say, I'm busy, I can't come out to that. Don't be a good German. Do people really want to look back at history as we look back at Nazi Germany and say, how the hell did that happen?
Right.
How the hell did people not stand up and speak up for what is right, for humanity, for the world? So I want to encourage people to be part of J20. Go to the website. There's so many ways people can be involved on so many different levels. And I truly want to thank both of you, not only for being here, but being just, strong, powerful women that are taking a really courageous stand and fighting for a better world.
Well,
So thank you for
Liz.
joining
Thank
me,
you.
and thank you for watching Voices of Resistance.
A war for gold, a war for money, and a war for souls. A war on terror, a war on drugs, a war on kindness, a war on hugs. A war on birds and a war on bees. They got a war on hippies trying to save the trees. A war with jets and a war with missiles. A war with high-seated government officials. Wall Street war on high finance. A war on people who just love to dance. A war on music, a war on speech. A war on teachers and the things they teach. A war for the last 500 years. War's just messing up the